Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. This is going to be a response video to something over on the Mercyful Metal channel. Great channel, lots of cool stuff. I mean, any channel that has the Glacier EP kind of hanging out here in the background, yeah, you know that's the good stuff right there. But yeah, recently he posted a sort of question or challenge to YouTubers to focus more on their collection. I think it's called Know Thy Collection. And I saw some people responding to it. Took me a while to get back to the original video because I saw a reply here, a reply there, but I didn't watch the original video until today. The reply that got me to finally trace it back to its origin was Jason's reply over at Black Leather Eyes. Always like his stuff a lot. And he had what seemed like an interesting batch of albums that he had chosen to show in response to it. So I'm like, okay, let me go back and see what the original question is so I understand what's going on. And yeah, the Merciful Metal sort of, challenge or thesis is for people to focus maybe more on the albums they already have in their collection and not worry so much about constantly trying to buy and track down and listen to new stuff. And that really resonates with me at this point in time. It's something I've been doing for a few months now. Going back to the end of 2024, I had picked up way too much stuff through the fall of 2024. Yeah, some of it's unavoidable because you find things on sale really good, or someone sells a collection at the local store, you get some great buys. Nevertheless, definitely near kind of the start of the holiday season, I felt like Jesus picked up way too much stuff lately. Haven't gotten a chance to spend hardly any time with any of it. It's time to just kind of shut this operation down for a while. And as such, I've picked up almost nothing during the past couple of months and done absolutely fine with that. Um, so yeah, Merciful Metal's point was kind of to, go back, listen to the records you've already got. I'm just like, yep, I can agree with that. And I've noticed that other YouTubers seem to be in that kind of similar headspace lately. For example, Melanie over at Melanie Loves Death Metal recently mentioned she's hardly buying any new releases right now. Just picking up, a thing here, a thing there, but mostly just spending time with the albums that she's already got. Same kind of thing here. Don't need to buy a ton of new stuff. There's a ton of albums behind me that I've spent very little time with, or I haven't spent any time with in a long time. It's time to go back and give those some more love, not worry about constantly trying to look for new stuff. I'm keeping an ear on new releases in case there are things I want to review for the Heavy Metallurgy channel, but I'm not running out and buying all of them. It's like if it shows up, as a promo link, I'll check it out. If it really captures my attention, yeah, I'll look into reviewing it. But if it's just like that sounds okay kind of average thing, I'm just passing, moving on, and sticking to what I've got. So, on to the actual challenge part here. There were three questions posed for people to respond to related to this idea of kind of getting reacquainted with your collection, knowing it better. The first one was to show a record that you've been playing lately. Okay, so for that, I have chosen this. It is the album Hyperactive by the band Savage. And this is a new wave of British heavy metal band. Most folks will know them for their debut album, which was this one called Loose and Lethal. This one's gotten a very strong cult following over the years. And there's a lot of people that hype it as one of the top new wave of British heavy metal albums of all time. Personally, I think they overrate the album a bit. Hey, if you love the album, that's great. Nothing wrong with it. It is not a bad album at all. It's actually a pretty good album. I just don't agree with putting it on the same tier as things like Lightning to the Nations or Killers or the debut album from Angel Witch. Like, this is not on that same tier of material. This is a really good, like, second tier new wave of British heavy metal album. I've got no problem with it there. It's just that, yeah, when people start talking about this as like, the end boss of all new wave of British heavy metal albums, it's like, no, sorry, gonna have to throw a flag on that call. That won't quite work for me. Anyway, The band did release a second album back in the day. This one called, again, Hyperactive, came out a couple of years after the debut. I think this one came out in 85. Part of the deal with this one is that they switched labels. The debut had done pretty well, especially for an album, of that size. I mean, we're not talking like it was a new Madonna album or something at the time, but it moved a lot of units for Ebony Records. So the band was hoping for more label support when they got time to record the second album. Ebony didn't exactly have a ton of resources at their disposal, so the band figured it was time to, move upward and onward to a label that, could, maybe handle the press and the hype and stuff for them a bit better. So they moved over to Zebra Records. Now, to be very clear, moving from Ebony Records to Zebra Records circa 1984, 1985, you are not moving on up in the world. You are at best performing a lateral move. And that's just the way it is. Because by the time this is coming out too, new wave of British heavy metal has kind of run its course. People argue about the end date. A lot of folks would describe 1984. So this coming out in 85, it's kind of like, yeah, well, we were around before the cutoff. Maybe we kind of grandfather you in for the next album. But it wasn't a style that was necessarily super popular at that point. A lot of bands did still release stuff around this time, and the Hyperactive album's actually pretty good. It just has some of the same problems that a lot of albums around this time have. For whatever reason, around 1985, everybody forgot how to record traditional heavy metal music in the UK. I don't know if they like rounded up all the producers and shipped them off to France, or there was a strike, or they all got drafted. I don't know. But the albums you hear start that come out around this time frame all tend to suffer from the same kind of crappy production. Bass? What bass? What's a bass? Did you have a bass player? Did you want to hear the bass on your album? Oh, sorry about that, chap. There's no bass on these albums. They always have this very kind of hollow sound where the drums are a little too loud and clangy. They never have a very full, rich, vibrant sound to them. So the album's working against, a pretty typical production for its time and place, and that is not a compliment. Nevertheless, songs on it are pretty good. There's a good energy to this. The guitar approach has kind of a simple, almost scratchy tone to it, but it provides a lot of energy and there's a lot of character to the songs. They're not like bursting out, venom levels of, energy, just, detonating here. But the songs tend to move pretty well, like the guitar performance, like the vocal performance on it. So, yeah, it is a decent album and a worthy follow-up to Loose and Lethal. Now, again, if you're in the camp that, proclaims this to be the best thing to ever come out of the UK, well, this one may feel like a little bit of a letdown in comparison. If you're on the team that says, yeah, this is a pretty good album, thumbs up, just, not the end all be all of records, then you're more likely, I think, to be on board with Hyperactive as well. So, yeah, it's been a good one to visit. I have known about it forever, but I only picked it up sometime last year. This was one of those cases where somebody had it really cheap. I was already adding some stuff to the cart anyways. Like, yeah, sure, I'll pick that one up too. I did preview it enough to realize that, like, okay, yeah, it's not like the band went into AOR territory or anything. It's really solid, late new wave of British heavy metal fare. Always kind of like the cover. It's relatively simple, but yeah, I think the design works just fine. And there are the lads, circa the time of this getting recorded. Which, yeah, this is kind of what a lot of new wave of British heavy metal bands look like by this point, for better or worse. So that's the one album I've been playing lately. Second question was to show two albums that you haven't played in at least a year. And this is pretty easy for me because in kind of mid late 2023, I started keeping track of when I play albums. I have my whole collection on a spreadsheet, so I just added another column, and now whenever I play something in that column, I add the date, just month and year. I'm not keeping it like down to the minute. I'm not that kind of sick little monkey. But, yeah, I'd be like, okay, I listened to this in, October 2024, put October 2024 there, move on with my life. I started doing this because I wanted to keep tabs on how often are some things getting played? We all say from time to time, it's like, oh, I haven't played that in ages. Oh, I haven't taken that off the shelf in years. I got things like, how many years? Has it really been that long? Did I play it a few times somewhere along the line and just kind of forget about it? Or has it really been 10 years since I played this? Well, let's start keeping track of it and find out. So at this point, I've got about 18 months of data. It's the kind of thing that's going to take a long time to, pile up and start to see maybe some different trends in like what styles I'm listening to more, which styles I'm not listening to very much, even what formats I'm taking out more often than others. So I'm hoping it'll tell me some interesting things about my collecting and listening habits. We'll see. Nevertheless, it's real easy for me to know if I've played an album in the last 12 months or not. I picked two at random off the shelf that I haven't played. One is Gamma Ray's Somewhere Out in Space. Excellent Gamma Ray album. This is when the band really hit their stride. Fantastic Euro power metal. This era of Gamma Ray is about as close as you ever get to those early Keeper era Halloween albums. I've said it many times before, but yeah, that Keepers sound is one that I've chased ever since I first heard those. Only a few things have ever really come close, and this era of Gamma Ray is one of them. Now, as one of my friends pointed out, it feels like cheating a little bit because it is another Kai Hansen project. At the same time, it's not like every Gamma Ray album went for that Keepers sound. There were those first few Gamma Ray albums, which those definitely have their own sound. We're just going to leave it at that for the time being. But yeah, even though this is a great album and I love it to death, I definitely have not played it in over a year. I probably haven't played it in several years. Second one I pulled for this was Bathory's Hammerheart. Haven't played this in at least a year. Fantastic album, kind of the dawn of Bathory's Viking era. I mean, I guess you can say Blood, Fire, Death is the dawn of the Viking era. There's a few songs on that album that go down this path. But a lot of the material on that album still has the rawness of the early Bathory stuff. Blood, Fire, Death to me is very much a transition album. This is the album where he really embraces, his inner Viking and runs with it. And I love the album to death. But it's been quite a while since I sat down and played this one. It's one of those albums, while it's good, it is long, and I kind of have to be in the mood for that particular style, and I guess I just haven't in the past year. So yeah, both excellent albums, both ones that I've had for a long time. Let's see. The Gamma Ray came out, I'm almost certain it was 97, and I probably got Hammerheart around 96 or 97 as well. So both of those albums are coming up on 30 years on my shelf. You can't play it all every day, all day. When you get collections the size of ours, and my collection is not that big compared to a lot of folks on YouTube, it takes a while to circle back around to things. If I played an album a day, every day, let's see, 365 days a year, it takes you 3 years just to get through about 1,000 albums. Well, I've got a few thousand different titles, so yeah, you're looking at, years and years and years could go by when certain things just don't have a chance to get played. So yeah, anyway, that's my answer for part two. Two albums that had been on the shelf for at least a year. All right, the third and last part of the Mercyful Metal questionnaire was to show three albums that you just don't remember what they sound like. And this one especially kind of got at his point that sometimes we have albums that we either played so little or we haven't played in so long that we honestly forget what they even sound like, which is a little embarrassing. It's like, well, that doesn't feel good to admit. I have this thing on the shelf. What's that? I don't know. What's it sound like? Mm. Well, why is it on your shelf then? Oh. Yeah, I think some folks would be like, I'm not sure I want to answer that part of the question. But it helps make his point that why do you need to go out and track down and spend money and order and purchase new stuff when you've got albums sitting right there at home that are essentially brand new to you? You could check those out instead. So I pulled three examples since that's what was asked. The first thing I pulled off the shelf that fits the bill for this question is a CD by a band called Frozen Dawn. The album is called Those of the Cursed Light. Um, this is a black metal band from Spain, and they're from Spain and they play black metal. And I think they've done about 3 or 4 albums. And you now know everything I know about this CD. Um, I do know it, at least it's in a black metal style. I'm guessing, I want to say it's more like on the melodic, dissection-y side of black metal. I don't think it's super raw or super atmospheric, but I don't really know for sure. I'm kind of trying to, vaguely remember here. Not 100% sure. So, why do I have this? When did I get this? I don't know exactly when I got this one. I could check. That is something else I keep track of on my spreadsheet is when I get certain items. But I didn't check this before I started recording. I feel like I got this sometime, ooh, let's call it 20, let's call it like 2018, 2019. So roughly maybe 6 or 7 years ago. May not have been quite that long. It may have been a few years less than that. It also could be a year or two longer. I do know where I got it. I got it at a flea market, going through record dealer's table. He had a ton of used CDs. He always has a box of used metal CDs. Most of them are metal in the sense of what your big sister thought heavy metal was in 1982. Yeah, there's going to be like autograph CDs and Quiet Riot and stuff like that. We're not talking like hardcore underground stuff for the most part. But this was in the box, and it stood out like a sore thumb. I mean, right away you could look at it and be like, first, that's at least 30 years younger than everything else in this used CD box. And I mean, it definitely had sort of a black metal aesthetic to it. I had never heard of the band. I was standing in the middle of a giant cow pasture with no cell phone reception, so looking it up on Metal Archives or YouTube wasn't really an option. But I figured, you know what? It wasn't much. It might have been like $6. I'm like, okay, it's on Extreme Music. I know they put out, some good reissues and stuff. They've had some good albums released over time. For $6, how many black metal CDs do you find in the middle of a cow field for $6? So it was cheap. It looked kind of interesting. I picked it up. I am sure I have played it a few times, but I really don't remember anything about it in particular. So, one that I probably need to revisit. All right. Second choice for question number 3 is this EP by a band called New York. It's called Carry the Torch. And this is a 12-inch EP. This EP has a few different pressings. Some folks may be looking at this right now thinking, wait a minute, I thought that had a black cover. Or, wait a minute, I thought that had a drawing of the Statue of the Liberty on cover. The answer to both those inquiries is yes, you're correct. But I have the pressing that's the white cover with just a band photo. And this is one of the later pressings. I want to say there's like 3 pressings. This may be the third and last one. So, yeah, it's not a super rare record. It's not a super expensive record. Again, just has a couple of tracks on each side. This one is traditional sounding 80s metal. And I'm guessing the band's from New York. If not, the name is highly ironic. But yeah, I couldn't name a song, couldn't hum a note, don't remember any of the details about this one. I do again remember where I picked it up. It was at a local used bookstore, which again, they have a small section of used albums. Most of it's exactly what you'd expect it to be, Fleetwood Mac and, Barbra Streisand and every bad Christmas album made since 1953. On rare occasion, they occasionally will have a metal album or two. And this showed up one time. I was like, huh, I've heard of this. It's, a legit heavy metal recording. Uh, kind of a, smallish independent type release thing. I knew it wasn't like a super rarity or anything, but like it was maybe like $10. Like, okay, it's my kind of thing, and for $10, I'm willing to give it a chance. Bought it, played it a few times, don't remember anything else about it. That's about it. So, might be time to replay the New York EP sometime. And again, it's not like I don't like it. I've kept it, and I am someone who will get rid of records that I really don't like. So it was good enough that it has stayed on the shelf, and I've probably had it. Now that I've probably had close to 10 years now. Yeah, probably. It's probably been sitting around here for about a decade. Just don't have a great feel for it. All right, third and last for this question. This album is always on my list of things I should revisit, and bless its heart, it just never manages to get on the turntable. It's an album by a band called Lodestone, and the album is called Lodestone. And it looks like this pretty simple kind of cover design, goofy little logo for the band there. Um, this is one of those kind of mid-priced collectible records. Typically, if you find a copy, it's probably going to be like $50 or so. I got it on eBay a long time ago, really cheap. Um, Sorry, it's got one of those Japanese style sleeves, so it's noisy to open, but thought I'd try to extract it to see what's on the back cover. All right, well, lots of lyrics. That was worth the bother. Once again, I didn't even know what was on the back cover here. This one's always had, a decent reputation among collectors of early 80s stuff. This one came out in 81. What does it sound like? I remember it still has one foot in the 70s hard rock sound, but a little heavier, maybe a little more forward thinking than that. So I want to say it's kind of in the vein of, again, like maybe early Riot, but this has not been on my turntable anytime in the past, certainly not the past 5 years. And I doubt it's been even in the past 10 years. But whenever I'm flipping through the record racks, I always see it. I always think, oh, yeah, I remember that being fairly good, but I don't really remember much about it. I should take it out and play it. And I just never do. So it's long overdue for a revisit. To my knowledge, it's the only thing the band recorded. There's not really even any info about the band on Discogs. So, yeah, there's not a whole lot else to go on. I bought it off of eBay simply because I knew it by reputation. That again, it was one of those kind of collectible records that a lot of people sort of like, yeah, that one's pretty good. And it showed up. Nobody really bid on it very much. So I got it for a really cheap price, probably around, I would guess, 2009. Again, give or take a couple of years. So that is one pattern that I do notice with a lot of these that I don't know particularly well. They're things that I bought because they were cheap. They looked interesting, or, I knew like, one little bit of info about them, enough to make me willing to pay a low price for them. But they weren't albums that I was already familiar with. They weren't things that were on my want list. I wasn't actively hunting for these particular records. It's more like I stumbled into them at the right price when I had a few dollars to spare and figured, okay, what the heck, we'll pick it up. And maybe that's part of the take home lesson here for me is that I have to be a little more discerning about stuff like that, or at least be mindful of the fact that it may be cheap and it may turn out to be decent, but there's also a pretty high likelihood that it's going to get played a couple of times, shelved, and then forgotten for a very long stretch of time, too. And if that's the case, why do I really need to buy it in the first place? That's the hard question we've got to ask. I mean, hey, sometimes you're just in the mood to pick up a record. Sometimes you honestly do feel like, hey, I've got a good feeling about this one. I'm willing to take a chance on it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that approach. But, those kind of purchases do pile up over time, and they're not all going to work out and become, our next all-time favorite album. A lot of times they're just going to start to clutter up the shelves over time. So, might behoove me to be a bit more discerning when those situations come up. And again, that is coming full circle to where I started this video. That's something I have been getting a lot more mindful about in the past couple of months. There's been occasions where it's like, okay, I'm buying this one CD. It's like, oh, I could add this to the cart. That one looks interesting. Hey, this is really cheap too. But more and more often, I find myself thinking, you know what? I don't want these. I don't really know what the heck that is. Let's forget about it. Yeah, that's cheap for that CD, but it's a pretty average album. I don't really need a CD copy of it. Take that out of the cart too. And this other one, yeah, I'm just throwing it in there because it's $5. But if I want to hear that, I'll play it on YouTube. Let's get that out of the cart. Also, let's just buy the one thing that I was looking for and that I am excited to get. And let's not overload the cart with a bunch of stuff that is likely to be subject matter for a video like this one sometime in the future. All right, let's wrap this up. So, what are your answers to the Merciful Metal Know Your Collection Challenge? Do you have lots of stuff that's piled up over the years that you also feel like, if I'm being honest, I don't really know what some of these sound like? If so, what you gonna do about it? You can just ignore it. It's not really a huge problem, but do you have plans to start digging through that stuff as we work our way through 2025? Are you going to thin out the collection and just get rid of some of that stuff? Or are you just going to let them sit there and collect dust the way they have been? It's not really a right or wrong answer to this, but it's an interesting topic for thought. And thanks to Merciful Metal for kind of, yeah, making the collecting community take a hard look at themselves, think this over, and trying to decide what to do with some of these albums that we own, but we just don't really know. All right, that'll do it for this time. Until the next video, everybody take care, and as always, keep banging your head. Assuming you know the record that you're banging your head to.